So you remember from histology that bones are a kind of connective tissue, and connective tissue's hallmark is that there are a few scattered cells and there's a whole lot of other material matrix around the cells. So in bone, that is very much true. You have a few scattered cells in the bone and the rest of it is all matrix. The funky thing about bones is that the matrix is actually this hardened material. It's actually a combination of an organic type of material, so about a third of it is organic, made mostly of the protein collagen, but there are other proteins, proteoglycans, so a protein that has sugars on it, or glycoproteins, similar sort of idea. So that's about a third of the matrix of the bone. The other 2/3 is inorganic, basically minerals, so most of it is calcium phosphate that has crystallized on that collagen matrix. The collagen part of the matrix is important in that it provides a flexibility to the bones. If there's a problem with the proteins and there isn't enough protein matrix or the proteins are made incorrectly, you lose flexibility and the bones get very brittle and break very easily. On the other hand, the inorganic part, the calcium phosphate salts, give really a strength to the bones. And if in fact the bones don't have enough of this calcium phosphate salt, they aren't strong enough and they'll bend really easily and also break. The cells of the bone. So there are two really important classes of cells that we'll talk about. The first are the osteogenic cells. These cells kind of go in a continuum of maturation. The osteoblasts are the important cells for building bone. And osteoblasts actually can build both components of the matrix of bone. So they're capable of producing the collagen fibers, so they make a lot of that collagen that's found in the matrix. They're also important in that they control that calcium phosphate mineralization. So they're important both in providing the organic matrix necessary for flexibility and helping get the calcium phosphate crystals in to build the strength. After the matrix has been built around the osteoblasts, they get encased within it and they are now osteocyte cells. Those osteocyte cells are still alive. They're still controlling a lot of what goes on in the bone, but they aren't building new bone necessarily anymore. The other important cells are the coolest cells. These cells actually are made from the same stem cells, the same adult stem cells that make all of your red blood cells and your white blood cells. But these are cool in that a bunch of cells will fuse together. So on average, you have maybe 8-10 cells, all of which fuse into this giant cell. Sometimes you can get up to 50 cells fusing. So you have this monster big blob osteoclast cell with like 30, 40 nuclei, all like snuggled up on the edges of the bone. And these are the cells that are eating bone away. And kind of like the osteoblasts can make both parts of the matrix, the osteoclasts can eat both parts of the matrix. So they are able to secrete an enzyme called acid phosphatase that will digest away the collagen, organic part of the matrix. And they have these pumps in their cell membrane that will pump hydrogen out of the cell onto the surface of the bone. And when the hydrogen goes out, chloride follows. Well, hydrogen and chloride together are making hydrochloric acid. So that acid is able to basically dissolve away the calcium phosphate crystals that have formed and release the calcium back into the blood where it can be used. So you always are having this balance of osteoclasts eating away bone and osteoblasts building bone. In fetal development, bones can be formed, but after the fetal development happens, you have existing bones that are mineralized and they can grow a couple of different ways. After puberty, bones pretty much can grow by appositional growth or they're growing wider. What helps them grow wider? Well, forces on the bone help control where more bone is put on or where more bone comes off. Doing resistance weight training, for example, will help increase the forces on the bone, help increase the appositional growth to help make the bones larger. In addition, during puberty, bones can actually grow. You know that long bones have at the ends the epiphyses, or the parts of the bone that are actually still hyaline cartilage. That hyaline cartilage is capable of expanding and making the bones longer. So that growth is called growth at the metaphysis or at the epiphyseal plate. This happens pretty much during the period of growth when you're getting taller. It happens by a process where the hyaline cartilage cells actually undergo mitosis, so they're making more cells. When you make more cells in the middle of a bone, essentially, or at the end of the bone, it's pushing the edges of the bone away from each other, so the bone is actually getting longer just by a process of making more cells. In addition to that, though, those cells then start to get bigger, or hypertrophy, again, pushing the edges of the bone longer. That matrix actually becomes calcified. The calcium phosphate crystals come in, crystallize. Now this is still hyaline cartilage though. So then the cartilage cells die off, and that cartilage that's been expanded gets replaced with bone by the process of osteoblasts building more bone that we just talked about. So that's how bones get longer. This is regulated early on, like after birth, even probably before birth, by primarily growth hormone, and it's modulated by thyroid hormone. So the growth hormone and thyroid hormone are really important prior to puberty. They continue to be important throughout life, but during puberty, the huge surge in the sex steroids hormones, the testosterone and the estrogen, help promote spurts of growth, so increased growth during those periods of time. The testosterone will help masculinize the skeleton, and the estrogens will help feminize the parts of the skeleton that are different between males and females. In fact, later in puberty, the testosterone and the estrogen can actually induce epiphyseal plate closure, ending long bone growth. So it's kind of funky in that it will stimulate growth through puberty, but then actually stops the bone growth. So here's sort of comparing the process of growth of a long bone with remodeling of a long bone. So long bone growth is happening at where the hyaline cartilage is, extending the length of the bones. Remodeling happens pretty much throughout life, and that remodeling, the osteoblasts are continually laying down bone, osteoclasts are continually eating it away. You actually tend to think of, oh, here's my femur, you've got the femur in lab, and you think, oh, well, this femur has been in my body forever. Really, though, the remodeling process is happening all the time. It's estimated about 10% of all of your bones are replaced every year. So that process is continuing all the time. There are a whole lot of hormones, vitamins, growth factors that are involved in this process. Luckily, you don't have to learn all of them, but you do have to learn a few important ones. So in the control of this whole process of building bone and moving bone away, most of the key part of that is regulated by blood calcium levels. It is essential that your blood calcium levels remain in a really pretty tight balance. If you have too much calcium in your blood, it can kill you. If you don't have enough calcium in your blood, it can kill you. So there are hormones that keep your blood calcium within a very tight range. But where are they going to get this calcium that they're keeping in a tight range? Pretty much from the bones, where it's being stored most of the time. So let's look at the different possibilities and the hormones that are involved. If your blood calcium goes too high, so there are sensors in your blood that say, oh, your blood calcium is way too high, your thyroid gland will actually release a hormone called calcitonin. Calcitonin is an important hormone that actually stimulates calcium phosphate to be deposited in the bone. Essentially, there's way too much calcium in the blood. It'll kill you if you have too much calcium in the blood, so sock it away in the bones is what calcitonin does. The opposite situation, where your blood calcium levels are too low, you don't have enough blood calcium, then really it's your parathyroid glands on the back of the thyroid that release a hormone nicely enough called parathyroid hormone, and the parathyroid hormone actually triggers osteoclast to get the calcium phosphate out of the bone and release it back into the blood, allowing the blood calcium levels to be higher again. So you have this continual balance of making sure that there's not too much calcium. If there's too much calcium, the calcitonin will come in and make sure that calcium gets stuck away in the bones. If there's not enough, the parathyroid hormone will come in and make sure it gets released from the bones. This is all kind of internal within your body, and obviously you're losing calcium as well. You're peeing it out like everything else. So another important hormone, more commonly known as vitamin D, but also called calcitriol. This one is important in that when your blood calcium levels are low, it actually increases absorption of calcium from what you eat to allow you to raise your calcium levels. So instead of, if your calcium levels your blood calcium levels are low, your bones would pretty much run out of calcium pretty fast, and you're in trouble because then your bones are going to fall apart. So the vitamin D then will bring more calcium into your body